Okay, I just want to start by giving credit to Tim Lindenbaum for many of the photos that you're going to see in this presentation today, to both Tim and Krista Kirkham for their dedication to our work in the Mackinaw River, and to our numerous partners and our funding sources over the years that have allowed us to continue conservation in this watershed for multiple years. So the Mackinaw River is a special river. It's one of the only rivers in the Midwest that is not yet severely degraded by human use. And natural features such as the moraine depositions, which form the banks of the river, and a strong groundwater influence have protected it from extensive impacts of the land use in the watershed. Now, one of the earliest accounts of the Mackinaw was written in 1773 by Patrick Kennedy. He wrote, "At sunset, we passed a river called Mackinac. It has between 30 and 40 islands at its mouth with the Illinois River, with plenty of good timber, including red and white cedar, pine, maple, and walnut, and also large plains and meadows extending as far as can be seen." The name Mackinaw comes from Ojibwa, meaning great turtle, and just over 500 archaeological sites have been documented in the basin that provide us with some insights into the early inhabitants of the basin's past, including about 40 white flint spears known as the Mackinaw cache. This dates back to the ancient Hopewell culture that were known for their mound building and for creation of effigies. Now, much of the landscape historically was wetland and marsh habitat, surrounded by dense vegetation of sawgrass, sedges, and cattails. And early colonizers recall how every spring and fall the prairie was covered with water, so the whole countryside was a great lake. Wagon traffic came to a complete stop, and men could only get around on horseback. Now, prairie also dominated the Mackinaw River Basin, and early records of this area state how the prairie grasses grew to a moderate height as a rule, but here and there grew to a height such that a man on horseback was invisible. Other early explorers recorded huge wide prairies where there's nothing to see but sky and prairie, grass at an average of 2 feet high, but also in places as tall as a man. Now, from these prairies spring the deep and fertile soils that today make this area an agricultural mecca. In the early 1800s, settlers began to push westward to Illinois, reported the land was suitable for planting of all crops. But gradually the wetlands were drained and the prairie sod was broken for tillable ground. And today, roughly 85% of the basin is agricultural, and this area is a state leader in both corn and soybean production. Now, nitrogen is necessary for crops, but also has been identified as detrimental to water quality locally, but also as far as the Gulf of Mexico. But water quality and altered hydrology are not unique to the Mackinaw River. In fact, they're rather typical among the agricultural watersheds in the upper Mississippi River Basin. So the Nature Conservancy has been working with numerous partners over the years to conserve biodiversity in the watershed, protect freshwater resources, and at the same time sustain profitable farming operations. So the next few slides I'm going to cover real quickly a couple of our projects in the headwaters of the Mackinaw, in Lexington, Illinois, and a new watershed project in Lake Bloomington and Evergreen Lakes, which are water supplies for Bloomington. So the first project is a 12-year paired watershed study. It's conducted in the headwaters of the Mackinaw River. And in this study, we measured the importance of outreach for conservation. We monitored best management practices in terms of water quality, hydrology, and biodiversity. And sure enough, we did increase the number of conservation practices in our treatment watershed where outreach was conducted, and specifically conservation tillage, grassed waterways, and stream buffers. But what our data told us is that these practices are not enough to improve water quality and hydrology in our watersheds. Now, one of the reasons is much of the soils in the Mackinaw watershed have high clay contents, and they retain water for extended periods of time. And in order to farm these areas, the farmlands are drained using these agricultural tile drain systems. These export large volumes of nutrient-rich waters into adjacent waterways right underneath those buffers and grassed waterways. Now, new tile is going in every day, all the time. So what do we do now? Well, we're working closely with NRCS and Soil and Water Conservation District to begin measuring the effectiveness of constructed wetlands at retaining tile water long enough to see nutrient reductions. So we're in the process of installing wetlands like this, one that you see right here in our treatment watershed, to intercept tile runoff prior to flowing back into the Mackinaw River. Now, at our demonstration site in Lexington, Illinois, we're working with the University of Illinois to test how large these wetlands need to be relative to drainage areas to actually retain that water long enough to see nutrient reductions. Data from these projects here are being incorporated into our new project, working with the City of Bloomington and Environmental Defense Fund to begin looking at their water quality problems associated with agricultural runoff. Now, forest has also decreased in the watershed, but much of the riparian zone throughout the basin does remain, at least as a narrow forested strip. And this forested buffer tends to stabilize the river's banks. It's considered a primary reason for the relatively good health of the Mackinaw River. Now, the Parklands Foundation is another nonprofit group that works in the area. They're based in Bloomington, and they've been instrumental in preserving open lands in the Mackinaw River Valley. And their goal is to create a network of conservation land corridors along the Mackinaw River and its tributaries. And since its founding in 1967, this organization has protected and restored more than 3,200 acres of prairie, savanna, floodplain forest, and river habitat. So these combined efforts then continue to provide habitat for numerous plants and animals like the showy orchis and yellow lady slippers, as well as threatened and endangered species like the tall sunflower and the heartleaf plantain, and also the animals that inhabit that area like the Illinois coarse frog, the short-eared owl, the veeries and loggerhead shrike, and many others. These forests also sustain many common woodland species that we see quite often when we're out there, including white-tailed deer and fox, large birds like the great horned owl and the red-tailed hawk, and multiple small birds like you see here, indigo bunting and Baltimore orioles and common yellowthroat. Many other resident and migratory birds as well. In addition, the Mackinaw supports a high diversity of aquatic species. There's more than 60 species of fish and over 30 kinds of mussels. The wetlands that we're creating today and the wetlands that still do exist in the area provide habitat for multiple birds like black-crowned night heron and soar rails that we see migrating through in the middle of cornfields, multiple turtles, and crayfish species. Now, there's also some less adapted aquatic species that tend to inhabit the river on a somewhat regular basis. And open access for cattle to the river do increase bank erosion and sedimentation to the river. But cattle and water quality issues in the Mackinaw and other watersheds can be addressed using existing farm bills. So regardless, the Mackinaw River remains one of the finest examples of a prairie stream that we have left in Illinois. And as you can see from this presentation, there's a coordinated effort among the stakeholders to conserve the biodiversity in the watershed, maintain profitable farming operations, and all that in the context of protecting our freshwater resources. That's my story.